Welcome everyone to our webinar today. I'm David Isaacson with ETQ, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on how Ecolab cleaned up its quality processes across its global organization. Before we get started, I just want to talk about the logistics for today's webinar. We're using GoToWebinar, and you can use the widget on the right to help get us messages if you have any issues or ask questions through the Q&A box there. So with that, we'll drop into the webinar now. And as I said, I'm David Isaacson, VP of Product Marketing with ETQ, and I'm really excited today that I'm joined by a very special guest, Mary VandeVoort, who's the Senior Program Manager at Ecolab. In a couple of minutes, Mary's going to get into the details of their quality journey. But before we do that, I just want to give a brief introduction, talk a little bit about ETQ and what you can expect from what you're going to hear today in terms of the products that Mary's going to talk about. So on the next slide, we'll see, first of all, one of the reasons we're talking about the quality journeys and what our customers have experienced is because there are a lot of challenges that exist today for quality professionals. Many of these may sound very familiar to you, or some of them you may have others that should be on this list as well. But things like inconsistent processes or audit prep wastes a lot of time, limited visibility into supplier quality, lack of process harmonization across multiple locations and multiple QMS systems. The list goes on and on. There are so many different issues that quality professionals have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you need the right tools to help you make the most of the quality information that you have and the quality processes that we all really want to strive for these days. Now, on the next slide, we can also see that those challenges aren't just challenges in and of themselves, but they pertain across the entire product lifecycle. Starts with product design and gets back to product design as well. Goes through supply chain, making sure we have the right suppliers, and with these days with supply chain disruption, it's a challenge to make sure that we have the right materials to build the products when we need them and that they're at the right quality level that we expect. Goes through the manufacturing process. We check a lot of product that comes off the assembly line, and then we go ahead and check it again, and if we have any issues, we can create a non-conformance, we can go through a CAPA, take advantage of the tools to help resolve those issues. Goes through the logistics. How are we getting our product out to the market in as high a quality processes as we can best do so? And also into sales, making sure that our salespeople are selling at the right quality level. And then finally, getting feedback from customers, the ultimate arbiter of quality, how the products are perceived, how they buy them or don't buy them, what they tell each other, social media. So getting that feedback and then feeding it all the way back through the supply chain, the whole chain here is really, really critical. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to talk now a bit about ETQ and the solutions that we have to address some of these challenges that we've seen. First of all, ETQ provides a cloud-native quality management system. It has a very broad portfolio of applications. Talk about that in a moment. Very flexible, very scalable, so it can meet most quality needs today and into the future. We take advantage of 30 years of deep quality expertise. And that not only comes from our own in-house people who understand quality extremely well, but comes from our customers, such as Mary, who help guide us as to what the next best approach needs to be for managing quality. And we strive to give our customers an outstanding experience on a day-to-day basis and support them with the resources that they need. Okay. We go to the next slide. We look at our customers and they fall on a very broad spectrum in terms of their knowledge, in terms of their experience, in terms of the maturity level with quality management. And that can range from some folks who are just starting out Maybe they take advantage of document control and audits. In fact, you'll hear Mary talk about how Ecolab started with their journey, goes through the accelerate phase, which is where we start to see some integrations come into play, expands, where we get supply chain really driving forward and making sure that our suppliers are integrated into the entire process, as well as integration with other manufacturing systems, quality control systems feeding into the quality management system. And then finally, the transform phase, where we get to digital transformation, smart factory, global harmonization of information and processes around the globe. So there's a point where lots of customers can step in and take advantage of the environment and the systems. Doesn't matter where you are. There's always a place, an entry place where you can start your quality journey. Now, on the next slide, I just want to mention a little bit about, I said, 30 years of experience, lots of customers in lots of different industries, whether this is discrete or process manufacturing, life sciences such as medical devices or pharmaceutical, electronics, consumer goods, services, and so forth. We serve over 24 different industries. And by doing so, we're able to take advantage of the learnings and the knowledge from all of those different industries and do a lot of cross-fertilization. We take advantage in our products, and our customers learn from each other. On the next slide, you're going to hear Mary talk about ETQ Reliance, which is our quality management system. The quality management system is made up of a lot of different products and capabilities and applications, and you can see them listed here on the screen. Whether it's just said document control or corrective action or new product introduction or supply chain management, this is a fully integrated application suite that has a very strong platform of cross-application capabilities. It's in the cloud, and it is supported by analytics as well, so you can understand what's going on in your environment. And the last thing I want to say about ETQ Reliance, which is on the next slide, is that when I look at these applications, there are 42 of them right now. It's an ever-growing set of applications that support a broad range of quality capabilities, as we just saw. It's on a single platform, which gives us the ability to support global organizations and give visibility to those global organizations about what's going on in their quality management world. And it's all based in the cloud. So you get access anywhere, anytime. It's backed by very strong security, so you can set up roles and access rights for any individual, whether they're inside the company or they're a supplier or other third party who needs to come in and participate in your day-to-day activities and workflows. So that's a brief overview of ETQ, a brief overview of ETQ Reliance. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mary to introduce herself and take you on the Ecolab journey.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Again, my name is Mary VandeVoort. I work for Ecolab. I'm a senior program manager, and I am responsible for the deployment of ETQ out into our organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, our journey, and it is a journey where we haven't finalized that journey yet, as well as some of the challenges and expectations. But before I do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are as a business, overview of who the company, what the company is, talk about the business case that we made when we moved to ETQ, a brief overview of what the program looks like, how we handled deployment, what that looked like. We did it in what we called waves. And then I'll talk a little bit about tools and benefits as well as challenges. So first and foremost, who the heck am I? Again, like I said, my name's Mary VandeVoort. I've been with Ecolab for 18 years now. I've got a large breadth of experience when it comes to the supply chain, having spent time in both planning, procurement, in various areas within the organization. Came into this role as we had made the decision to move to ETQ, and I've been part of that deployment ever since we brought them on. But as part of that deployment, I am proud to say that we actually were awarded with the PMO, or Project Management Office of the Year, because of our EQMS deployment across the globe and how successful it was. And that was it was a joint effort between Ecolab and ETQ. One other note as we're going through here is that Ecolab likes to call things our own special names. So you may hear me reference it as EQMS, and that is our internal name for the platform that we use, which stands for Electronic Quality Management System, and ETQ being the supplier that provides us with that software. All right, so let's first talk about who Ecolab is. Ecolab, our tagline is everywhere it matters, and truly that's what it is. We are a global company. We focus in on 4 main pillars. First is health, the second is food, the third is water, and the last one is climate. So really dig in on that whole environmental impact, making sure that we're having a positive impact. We have chains of businesses literally in 160 countries across the globe, and our supply chain reflects that as well. So you'll hear about that being one of the many challenges that we had as we moved forward. What we do is we have 3 main pillars. We have chemistry, so we do have chemical reaction plants across the globe. Technology, we have a very strong R&D program that helps support and feeds into it. And then we have digital, so we use real-time data. We have data analytics that happens across the globe, largely in India, which is where our center of excellence are located there. But it's all about the enterprise ability to give solutions to our customers and holistically cover them in a multitude of areas. And just like what we were talking about with ETQ, we service the largest customers. They're our top 2% of our sales, our largest customers, and our top 10 customers are 10% of our sales. And so it's, we come in from a corporate perspective to work with other corporations, very much a B2B approach on it. But with that comes its own challenges, because as you can see with the list of customers that you see here, most of these companies are also global. And so we need to make sure that we have an approach that helps address that. So just to kind of level set us, 3.5, I believe, years ago, the question came up of how do we handle quality? The reality is that our cost of quality was very high. We had all sorts of different systems that were managing quality. They weren't talking to each other. We had processes that went from somewhat in SAP to Excel spreadsheets to emails to, good luck, we have no idea what's happening at all. And so it was difficult for us to get our arms around what was going on. We didn't know. We were spending all of our time and resources on administrative responsibilities, trying to just dig up enough information to figure out what the heck was going on, and not nearly enough time thinking about what root cause looked like. Not to mention the fact that we had multiple ERP systems, and we had no way to hold our suppliers accountable for anything that they were sending us because we had no documentation trail. And so an effort was put forth to bring in one single solution, a global QMS platform, and the platform that was selected was ETQ. We did have quite a few benefits that went with it. We had savings that were associated with it, largely on the headcount side, quite frankly, spending less time doing admin work. We had some pretty serious FDA concerns that we had to address, and this helped us address that. And we gave, we've seen a reduction in failed batches. We've seen an increase in data and reporting, and we've also seen a much better way of being able to get feedback from both our field sales and our customers regarding what they were seeing and what they were feeling out in the workforce. And lastly, just from a data perspective and being able to share what common root causes are, so that we weren't seeing those occurring across the organization without any visibility to one another. So we were able to address them holistically rather than just playing whack-a-mole with quality issues. And so what happened is that we brought in ETQ, and they helped us. What you can see as you're looking at the slides is how we broke things out. We started off what we called Wave 1, which was a focus on CAPAs and SCARs, audits, and non-conforming materials, and those took place in 2019. We took about 4 months to get that up and running and deployed out across the globe. And then we moved on to wave 2, which is customer feedback and complaint management. That took place in 2020, which came with its own challenges as we were rolling from 2020 into 2021 and COVID happened. But we persevered and moved into wave 3, which is where we went to document control and training, plan deviations, product action teams or recalls, and quality observations. And we are now moved on to wave 4, which we've just started up, which is focused on change management, which is technology transfers, and there's going to be multiple threads to that. We'll plan to end with assets calibration and maintenance. Again, it's all business units, and just to kind of give you a scope of that, we have 48,000 employees across the globe, and we have approximately 300 plants located across the globe. So this is not a small undertaking in any way, shape, or form. And so we had to be really thoughtful in making sure that how we deployed out, it was holistic and it was an approach that worked for everybody, because again, we were coming from having multiple quality approaches and trying to get alignment and agreement amongst the users to make sure that we were all doing the same thing the same way, and ETQ helped us with that. Again, we did bring ETQ. They helped us with the development, the validation work initially, and then we actually have a team that's located in Pune, India, who does the vast majority of our development work today, as well as all of our validation work, which is a huge resource for us. ETQ does come in and help us as we need to, where we get stuck, but we're largely self-sustaining at this point. And so what we've seen, and I've kind of hit upon this a little bit, is in terms of the benefits, is that number one, we now, when FDA comes in, when we have reviews in Europe, we have a verified, validated system. And so that might not seem like a big deal to anybody who doesn't have to have a validated system, but it was a huge deal to us to be able to go in and say, yep, we've got the documentation trail to show that we have done the proper validations on our systems. We did not have it in the past. We have a clear escalation process. Again, if there are problems and issues, we have a good way to make sure that we're aware of what's happening and sharing those results. It's faster. This flow is much more automated, where we know the work's going to the right person in the right place. It's getting addressed quickly. This is especially huge for our regions that are fed product from larger plants, especially from North America into like IMEA. They didn't know who to contact if there was a problem, and now they have a direct resource to go to. All records in one place. I cannot begin to emphasize how huge this is, that we can actually do deep dives and understand what's happening with our data, what's happening with our chemicals, where there's problems, and being able to address them much more holistically. And another piece of that is metrics. We now have all of our ETQ data coming out, being ported into Azure, and now we're utilizing that in Power BI and analytics. And we've seen a massive effect in terms of what we are trending and tracking in terms of critical events. And it really is a fantastic approach. And we've added now multiple system connections, which I'll talk a little bit more on future slides, to help us make sure that we're being consistent about how that data is coming in and making it as easy as possible on our associates. So one big piece for us that I think often gets missed when you're doing global deployments is making sure that you have the resources for your for folks to use. And so this is just a snapshot of the different resources people have to help ensure that they know what to do and when to do it when they're utilizing that tool. We literally have YouTube how-to videos. We have one-sheeters people can print off and look at. We have a very active team site where people can ask questions of each other. We hold global events. We utilize a tool called Workday, where we have all of our training in there and people can go in and look. We have a group of super users that help answer questions across the globe, a ton of training content, and really just we're trying to make sure that we're approaching it from multiple angles to give our associates the best tools that they need in order to be as successful as possible and encourage making sure we're recording quality incidents, and so that we're getting them addressed as soon as possible. So coming back to those data connections, so today for ETQ or EQMS, we do tap into a lot of different data sources. The big one being SAP, but we also have about 60 ERP systems across the globe, which is a massive undertaking of data. So that data comes into ETQ. We utilize CRM, we utilize Salesforce, we utilize Power Apps. All three of those are utilized to get data from our field sales who are recording it on behalf of our customers so that we can do our due diligence against any issues that our customers are seeing. We're doing all of that along with all of those other systems feeding in. So there's a lot of different data points that come in. And we've just recently moved, as I indicated, to QDL, which is the exporting that data into a Power BI for reporting and analysis, and that's been highly successful for us in terms of being able to do our due diligence on issues that are happening in the organization. And so, you can't build something and just walk away. And so one of the things that we've been very aggressive about and making sure that we're staying on top of is we actually have a process for taking requests from people to make changes and updates to EQMS. And so we actually have an enhancement list. We have module owners that go in. We do a governance on it to ensure that we're identifying and prioritizing projects that are going to make the system work that much better for everybody. They meet on a bi-monthly basis because that's about as much time as we need to be able to explore, build, test, and deploy out changes within the systems. And they all work together to try to make sure that we're being consistent about it. It allows our users to have a voice in making changes and making improvements, because I don't know everything. My dev team doesn't know everything. They're not the users, and the users are the ones who we really want to make sure are engaging on that process. And that really has allowed us to make continuous improvements. We're all about that within the organization to ETQ. Every time we turn around, we're trying to make little tweaks and changes to it to make it even better for our users. But the audience itself, or the users themselves, have been very positive about it in terms of what they're seeing, what they'd like to see changed, making recommendations. But they have embraced it wholeheartedly from across the globe. Now, of course, no deployment comes without challenges, and that certainly is the case for us. There has been, there's probably 5 main challenges that I have listed out here. The first is global adoption and training. When you're talking about 300 plants across the globe, different approaches coming from all different systems, trying to get out there and make sure you're getting in front of associates who, some may work on the floor of a plant, some of them are working in corporate offices, and making sure you're tailoring their experience to them to help them understand what their piece of the puzzle is to utilize the system is always in and of itself a challenge. The second challenge is a languages overlay, which ETQ has. I have to admit, that's probably been a very challenging piece for us. We have identified 11 languages that we want to convert over for our users who are not native English speakers, to have them have a better experience with the tool. And that has been quite challenging, quite frankly, to get it in place and properly working. Data connections, you've got a sense of how many data connections we have going on. Most of them are done through SFTP, but now we're trying to move it to be more API focused. And anytime you're dealing with data connections, it's always a challenge because you're working with various IT departments to get that data. Mergers and acquisitions is in of itself a challenge. Ecolab's growth has very much been a part of mergers and acquisitions, bringing in new companies, and every time that happens, then you have to reset, restart, get new data, and get people level set and get them into the system. So even though we fully deployed CAPAs and SCARs 3 years ago, even today we're still training new people because we're bringing on new companies. And that is in and of itself a challenge because you have to get them acclimated to using your processes and procedures, which isn't always the easiest sell. And then, along those lines, we're talking about a global tool and a global approach, but every region, every division that we have within the organization has different approaches and different ways that they want to go about bringing in how they handle, whether it be a CAPA or a SCAR, an NC or an audit. Everybody has little nuances. And so the tool allows us some of that flexibility, but when you think about it from a procedural level, you have to be very careful about how you approach it and making sure that we're being, doing what we say and say what we do, and we're being consistent about it. So trying to find that delicate balance between having the right processes and procedures in place and having the tool support that, while giving the flexibility for our regions and divisions to do what they need to make sure that they're supporting our customers appropriately. All right. So that's the big journey for Ecolab. It's been a long one. Again, we've only just started. We've got many more modules that we're planning on deploying out. As you saw, we've got 10 or 11 of them already deployed. We've got many more planned on being deployed, but we want to make sure that we have everybody's going in the same direction. And so that in and of itself is a challenge to make sure we're hearing all the voices and building it appropriately. But I would like to open it to any questions that people might have about our journey, what challenges we faced, et cetera. I'm happy to chat about those.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mary, and a lot going on. And couple before we open it up for Q&A, and in fact, this gives people a chance to use the GoToWebinar widget. Remember to use that to submit your questions on the right-hand side of the screen. But as we wait for some questions to come in, first thing that comes to mind is how big an organization, how big a quality team do you have to manage all of this?
Great question. I have 4 developers who are located in Pune. I have 2 validation experts who do all the validation documentation for us. And then on my team directly, I have a person who handles specifically just the enhancements process, the governance around that, myself, and then another person who handles more of the technical issues here in North America. So we kind of make sure we have coverage 24/7 between the folks in India as well as the North America contingent. But it's a pretty small team compared to how much data.
Yeah, that was my initial thought. I was like, wow, you're managing all this with such a small team. And if somebody wants to make a change to a process or a procedure, say in 160 different locations, that's amazing. How do they request that? Do they come to you? Do they submit a change request? How does that process flow?
We actually use a tool called DevOps to record any change requests that happen, because we're obviously still working on deploying change management within ETQ. But DevOps is our source of making those requests. We actually have a whole process along that. You can make the request, it gets reviewed, and then it gets determined if it's something we're going to move forward with or not, prioritized, and then it moves to our development team, and then they build it, test it, build it in the validation environment, we validate it, and then we move into production. So there's a governance process that's specifically around that. Part of that is two little kind of offshoots of it. The first is making sure that we're updating our procedures to reflect the changes that have occurred, and the second is making sure we're updating our training so that it is up to date for what the system looks like, so our users have that clear expectation of what they're looking at.
Okay, wow. And so how long ago did you start? When did you first roll out the first set of modules?
2019.
So it's only been 3 years, and
yeah.
In that time, how do you see things have changed? How things have changed at Ecolab, and how are you measuring success? Take both of those in there.
So we measure success. We have what we call a quality pyramid, and so just like a pyramid, the bottom level is quality incidents or near misses, if you will, moving it up to non-conformances to CAPAs, and then we have at the very top of that pyramid, we have what we call MQIs and CQIs, or major quality incidents or severe quality incidents. What I can say, since we've brought on that system, our system with ETQ, is that we have seen our CQIs and MQIs, which is the most severe quality incidences, drop significantly. We're actually trending for our second year of 0 in both quality and major and significant quality incidences, which is huge for an organization of our size. And we're seeing an increase in the number of near misses that are being recorded, which means that people are actively engaging with the ETQ tool to make sure that they're recording these and sharing them. And then one of the really great benefits is because we now have this global view and we can actually share, we actually do sharing sessions on any major CAPAs that we have within the system. We share them across the globe so that we can have those learnings shared. You know, if it happened in Europe, can it happen in IMEA, or can it happen in North America? And we actually have taken, because of ETQ's robustness of data, we're able to look at things much more holistically and hopefully address them before they become issues in other plants.
Okay, and it's, you know, from what you talked about, you have the manufacturing, the plants, and also the services side of the business. How do you use ETQ on both sides of the business? Is it different? Is it the same? Is there overlap?
It's different. So the way we utilize ETQ in any sort of quality is that we don't talk directly to our customers. Our field sales, which is actually the vast majority of our organization, are sales folks. And so they're the voice of our customers. And so they utilize those apps I was talking about, either CRM, Salesforce, or a Power App to report issues that they're hearing from their customers. And it could be something as simple as, I don't like the color of your chemical, I wish it was pink instead of blue.
Okay.
I wish
you really
I was
get
checking.
that, huh? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we really do. To, you know, hey, this thing exploded and it caused a major issue, right? So it's a whole gamut. But because of the robustness of the tool that we have today with ETQ, they all come in as feedback. They get automatically allocated to the appropriate person based on the division, the region, all of the different pieces that we need to have. So we're looking at it quicker, we're addressing it quicker, and then we can actually interconnect all of those feedbacks if they're all related to one issue when we do a complaint, which is beautiful because it means that we're not kind of running around and chasing our tail anymore. But it allows that communication from our field personnel to be much more reactive and much quicker to respond, so that if there is something massive that is happening, we're on top of it quicker than we would have been in the past, where it took through several lanes of communication before it actually hit anybody who could do anything about it from a manufacturing side.
Okay, and in addition to internally using the QMS, you started using this with suppliers as well, right?
We do. Yep. So
how does that work? You know, how is that working for you now?
Good. So a couple different things there. So we do utilize the SCAR module, and we have a supplier quality team who utilizes that, as well as actually the audit module for supplier audits. And we use those interconnectively when we have QBRs with our suppliers. We don't have the suppliers today going directly into ETQ. We're just not at that point in time in our journey where we're comfortable with having external folks coming in. But what we do is we send them an Excel sheet with all of the issues. We have them fill it out, and we just upload it into ETQ, and it automatically updates with their feedback. And what we have used with that information is a couple different things. Number one, it helped us identify some issues with suppliers that we weren't aware that was happening, so that we could make a decision on whether or not to keep that supplier in our portfolio. And in fact, we've dropped a couple suppliers as a result because they weren't able to execute against what we needed. Number two, it has given us, you know, speaking as a former procurement person, a lot more leverage when it comes to contract negotiations and discussions. We can go to a supplier and we actually have real actionable data to say, hey, you cost us X amount of dollars because of your screw up. And either going back and getting price breaks or getting checks cut or whatever the case may be that our procurement group needs to do in order to make sure that we're getting what we need from our supplier appropriately. We didn't have that in the past. It was literally emails was how we were tracking it. And clearly that's not the way to handle it. So this is a much more actionable and much more data-driven decision making as opposed to what we have done in the past.
Wow. Okay. And I'm curious, since you've been running for 3 years, I assume that, you know, a year or two before you actually installed the QMS, you did the full market research and looked for the right vendor. In terms of your C-suite, how did you get buy-in from them, and then how are they feeling about the investment today?
So it was a long discussion. We looked at multiple vendors, and what ETQ could provide us was a couple of things. Number one, I mean, price is always a consideration. And ETQ could meet what we were looking for in terms of price. The flexibility of the system was huge for us. Again, going back to the concept that we needed to have some flexibility for our regions, our divisions. ETQ gives us that with the ability to go in and go into that designer environment and change the configurations just based on one division, and we can do that easily. And so that was part of the sell. The other part of the sell is that when you look at ETQ, you have so many different modules and so many different approaches, and they all interact. And being able to kind of have that one-stop shop was huge for us. And so that's really what drove us towards ETQ versus other solutions, because like I said, we did look at others. So that conversation took place. Full disclosure, I was not part of those conversations. That took place before I got hired into this role, but I was aware of them happening. But post that, you know, when I came in, I can tell you that our VP of quality utilizes this information and is 100% supportive of utilizing ETQ as our single source of truth when it comes to quality management, and has been he and our supply chain VP have been super supportive because they see the benefit and they've seen the payoff when you look at our quality incidences and our ability to really utilize the data to make intelligent decisions rather than reactive decisions.
That's great. Before we open it up for questions, one last question I have for you, Mary, is how would you recommend someone start?
They're looking
at,
over that, yes. So as I think I indicated towards the beginning, there was one of the drivers for why we needed to have a centralized solution was from an FDA perspective, we had a finding around CAPAs. And so that actually drove how we decided how we were going to deploy waves. And it's why we deployed out first CAPA scars, audits, and non-conforming materials, is because we had to address that gap in our QMS according to the FDA.
Okay.
If it was like, you know, right back at the beginning, we didn't have this as a driving force, I personally would have started with document control and training, because that's really what drives everything else. But needs must, and you do what you have to do to get yourself through and address gaps. But yeah, I would definitely start with doc control and training to begin with. But again, we did what we had to do, and we're playing catch up yet today, but we're getting there now.
Okay, great. All right, so we have a question that's come in from Diane. This one was submitted ahead of time. It's quite a question. I'm going to read it, and Mary and I were talking about this a little bit before. We'll try to answer it as best we can, and we'll certainly follow up with Diane afterwards. But the question is, what is the most effective and efficient approach to harmonizing a company-wide QMS that will satisfy multiple requirements such as ISO 9001, 1385, and so forth, in multiple geographic locations, which kind of sounds like what you've been trying to do.
I can't say that I'm 100% effective. We're still tweaking, but from an ISO, so we've got, from an audit perspective, we have such groups as we have MDR in Europe. We've got ISO 9001 largely for our North America plants. We've got 13485, which is for our healthcare plants. And then we've got UL, NSF, and a couple other ones that are, you know, spotty here across the globe. The key to that has been making sure we have all the right voices in the room. I will admit that, especially for our healthcare folks, which are under much more stringent requirements from an auditing perspective, that we do have some sub workflows that we actually have built in based on that area or that division, that allows us to get more granularity versus a plant that was, say, aligned to an ISO 9001 standard. They may not have to answer additional questions, whereas their healthcare groups might have to. So again, it comes back to that flexibility of the ETQ tool that allows us to kind of say, hey, if this, then you need to answer these questions, and that helps us get into an alignment with it. But more broadly, when we were thinking about this tool and as we were building it, again, we got all those voices in the room. We talked through it, and we said, is this important? And if the answer was yes, then it was, show us the business case, because a lot of times when you're going in to do builds, the big thing you have to say is, just because we've done it in the past doesn't mean it's the right decision now. So let's talk about what's the business case for ensuring that this is the right process today. And every time we added a field or made an edit because of FDA, et cetera, we had to have that conversation. And sometimes the answer, quite frankly, was, well, we've just always gathered it in the past. Well, what have you done with it? Well, nothing. Well, then maybe we don't need it. So utilizing that kind of approach of what's the business case, what are we going to use it for, has been very effective for us.
Okay, that's great. Now, a couple of questions from Allie. I think kind of touched on the first one already, but what drove you to choose ETQ over other EQMS solutions? I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to what you've already talked about.
I feel like I've got that one down, but if there's further questions, Allie, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Yep. And then the second one, what do you do for EDHR?
I don't think I know what EDHR is.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing we don't do anything for that.
Design history records is what I believe.
Thank you.
I believe that's what that means, but.
So design history records we store in ETQ in our document control, and that is managed by our validation team. So that's what we utilize today.
Okay.
And that has to do with our need for having a validated system.
Okay, actually, device history records, yeah, inspection records is what Allie clarified.
Sorry, thank you, Allie. Device history records, we are just having conversations about that coming in. Our RD&E utilizes ETQ for their design history records. However, our pilot plants aren't utilizing it yet, so we're actually working on getting them into system.
Okay. All right, David wants to know any lessons learned during the training rollout?
Yes, so several lessons learned. I am very, very lucky that the woman who is running our training program is multilingual, because that was the first lesson. Even though Ecolab is, headquartered in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the expectation generally has been that folks need to speak English, that is not the case. And so that was one of our first lessons, is making sure that that training content is available in multiple languages so that you're speaking how people understand. And so that was one huge lesson for us. And like I said, thankfully I had the right person on my team to help us execute against that. The second huge lesson is that what works for some people does not work for everybody, which is why when I was reviewing that slide of the various ways that we communicate training, we have interactive trainings, we've got YouTube trainings. So there's, if YouTube trainings don't work for you, then maybe an interactive training course does. And then we would do in-person ones. So we really wanted to make sure we gave a multitude of opportunities for people to learn the way that they learn and not force fit them into a box of you have to learn it this way. And I think that helped make it very successful for us, because they had to, they were given that flexibility to learn at the level they needed to learn. And so that was a huge learning for us, because initially we were just utilizing one kind of box approach, and we quickly realized that that wasn't going to work for everybody.
Okay, and then Tim wants to get a comment from you on the difficulty of connecting the EQMS with other existing platforms that exist in the overall supply chain for Ecolab.
Well, it was a nightmare. I'm not gonna lie. So again, we have 60 different ERP systems, and we're working to consolidate. But again, even as we're consolidating, we're buying new companies, which means we have new ERP systems. And we've gotten pretty good at knowing how to get the data from those existing systems into ETQ. We're still working through the challenges of getting information from ETQ back into those systems, particularly SAP. However, now we're kind of trying. We started off by doing it via SFTP, which was kind of the easy way to do it. But it did take us quite a bit of work to get it to that point. Now we're working on API connections instead, because they're just more robust and better, et cetera. but again, it's, my data is only as good as the source. And that has probably been the bigger challenge there, especially when you think about parts. Because of 60 ERP systems, guess what? I can have a part number that's 17 digits, 16 digits long, but it could be replicated across multiple ERP systems. So how do you resolve those conflicts? And so that's probably been one of our bigger challenges there, is just how do you consolidate data that doesn't necessarily talk across the platforms, but now we want them to talk in one same platform, and how do you handle those conflicts? And so that's a big challenge. The other thing we had to do is that, when you think about your document control, or you think about our prior quality management systems, how do we get that data into ETQ so that we have the history? And sometimes the decision was we just can't. We just had to store it static. But when it came to document control, we literally had to pull it out of a SharePoint system and upload it into ETQ, and that took months upon months, because you have to clean up the data and you have to make sure it looks right. And it is, it's not a click a button and it's done. It's a pretty hefty lift to make sure you've got the right information, you've got it coded right, and everything matches. Because if you get errors, good luck hunting them down. We were talking about millions and millions of documents, and that's exactly what we were talking about, was millions and millions of documents. Right. So lots of challenges there.
All right, and it's an ongoing process too, it sounds like.
Yeah.
All right. One last question. That just curious, in terms of the cost of quality, are you measuring that now? It's slowly starting to trickle in.
Yeah. Could we do more? Yes. But one of the components of our non-conformances, our CAPAs, and our SCAR is cost. And so we actually require, before we're closing out any one of those, is we're recording what are the costs that are associated with that incident. And honestly, that's what we use going back to our suppliers. That's one piece of it. But internally, we track that so we can get a sense of, okay, where do we have gaps in our QMS? Are there opportunities working with our RD&E associates to address issues with our quality, the quality of our products? It helps us identify longer term where do we want to put our focus there. Because if you're seeing consistent issues that are happening across the network with a particular chemical, material, or even with a finished good, unless you can quantify that with real dollars, it's hard to get the resources on it. So that's kind of our next step, is taking all of this raw data around, where did we lose money on logistics, where do we lose money on repackaging, on all of the things that go into a manufacturing process, and how do we bring that to the attention of the leadership group so that they can focus on making the appropriate investments to address those changes.
All right. That's great. Looks like we've answered all the questions that have been submitted. Mary, if you could flip to the next slide.
Yeah.
On this slide, we just have some resources that folks on the webinar can access for more information. And Mary, I'd like to say thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your participating with us today, taking time to give everybody a little bit of insight as to how Ecolab is proceeding on their quality journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. I'm going to end the webinar for everybody now.